Now the first thing you need to do is get the outline drawing onto the paper by using whatever method you would normally use. And then I'm going to go to the masking fluid. This is PBO drawing gun. I'm going to place this all the way around the inside edge of the outline of the giraffe. I'm using a plastic milk bottle lid to do that with. I know, they come in really handy, they really do. I also use a cocktail stick as well, because they're really handy for flicking out some little bits of masking fluid into that background. And when we paint the background next, you'll see the reason for that, because you'll get some very, very fine lines onto that background. Time to remove that masking fluid. I'm using a very clean, dry finger. So don't have any natural oils on your finger or grease or anything like that. So make sure you also roll it from the outside in. Because if you do get a tear in the paper, I'd rather the tear go in towards the animal than into the background, which is harder to fix. Then trace out all the internal details as well. Wet in wet. Wet the area first of all you want to work, and then start to drop in some washes of colour over the top of that. Keep it very watery to begin with though. You see, even at this early stage, I'm starting to think about the overall shapes within the face. So the shapes within the ears, the shapes around the side of the face. Wet each section first of all, and then fill it in with colour. Now when I work on eyes, I do like to try and complete them, to begin with, because then it gives you something to look at whilst you're doing the rest of the painting, really does. You've got that life already within the painting. So take your time with these, because we want these to look, well, fairly realistic if we can. We of course want these eyes to look alive. Using my size 00 brush, a very detailed brush, I start to think about working on the details within those eyes, but make sure that those background washes are dry first though. Consider the overall shape of each eye as well. Make sure you get that right before you start to fill them in. Watercolour white. Now this is something I use on a regular basis, it really is. It's an opaque white paint. You can use white gouache instead if you want to, but I use this to add those very bright highlights within the face of an animal. Also within the fur as well, we'll do that later on. I could reserve the white of the paper by using masking fluid or something like that, but because there's going to be so much detail within this giraffe, I find it's easier for me anyway, from my own style, is to use white paint over the top. Then you can slowly start to fill those sections in using a size 2 brush, following those line directions and the curves at the same time. Little tip as well, don't overload that brush, because when you do, your lines will be far too thick on the paper. Now when working on ears, especially the ones, well, as big as these on the giraffe, because they're quite large, aren't they? A bit like mine really. What you find you need to do is wet it first of all and then start to consider the shape of those ears. Look at the way they start to get darker as you go in towards the middle. Now once it's dry, you can start to add some detail within those ears now. And I don't want to go too dark too soon, so I'm going to go with the lightest colours first of all again. Think about texture. That's what I'm doing all the time here. Now when I started working on the neck, what I wanted to do with this is to make sure that I don't go too dark too soon again. So I'm using sort of a milky consistency paint. Remember, you got watery, you got milky, you got creamy, and you got thick. So those sorts of 4 different consistencies which I tend to go to. So I'm going with a milky consistency first. But I'm also thinking about the shape for each individual patch that we can see with the neck of this giraffe. When you're painting fur on the outside edge of an animal, make sure the marks are tapered so it starts off with dots and gets finer and thinner as you flick out towards the background. That's why I put my painting upside down sometimes, as you've just seen, to make sure that I get those tapered edges. So flick it out to a point when you pull those hairs towards that background. You know, sometimes at this stage I tend to put the brush down, not on the painting though, and then walk away for 5 or 10 minutes. Go and put the kettle on. Just kind of take your eyes away from that painting. Because normally when you come back to a painting with those fresh eyes, you very often see something that you've missed. Or even something that you need to remove as well. You might put a little bit too much paint on in places. So remember, fresh eyes is very important. Vary those marks within each individual section you can see within the body, because you find they're not all the same colour, are they? Some are darker tones in places, some are lighter, some edges are darker, and this will all add to the shape of the body. So take your time with that, it's very important. Honest. I always say with white paint less is best, but it depends on the subject you're painting, it really does. And the problem is if you add too much white, you can make that animal or whatever it might be, bird, I don't know, can look very, very old, even though it's probably a youngster. So be very careful when using white paint because it can age an animal very, very quickly indeed. Now if you do want to learn how to paint fur in watercolour, have a look at the link to the top right hand corner of the screen, okay? I'll see you there.